Hey, so this upskilling video is all about taking an assessment and from that assessment best crafting a program and designing a program for your client or potential client. So just taking a simple one assessment to do a full body program, and today's assessment is on the squat. And even though squat is predominantly through the legs and the lower body, you are using your spine and also, depending on the type of squat, your arms as well. So you can do a full body assessment depending on position of your arms and the functional mobility through the hips, ankles, knees, and the rest of your body. So we're gonna go through a few of the conversations we see in a squat when you do an assessment. Over here, we got different conversations we have, and in the middle, we got like what a traditional squat should be, and where the center of gravity should be, and where the weight shift should be when you got a barbell sitting on top of you. Okay, so we got weight shift. So that's when you're shifting to one side. This is usually when someone is detrained or hasn't been training at all, or has had a previous injury or some kind of weakness. So their body weight will shift to one side, and it could be lower extremity or upper extremity, just really depends. But what I've done is written what whereabouts would be tight, whereabouts would be weak for each of these squats that I've got here. The thing with this one, you want to the best way I remember it is if, for example, I've got internal rotation through my shoulder. So just notice how crinkled my top can become right here in the chest, and how stretched out it can be right at my upper back. So when I'm looking at an assessment on people, I'm looking at their clothes as well, if it's fine details. And if they're quite crinkled, then right here, I can tell that my chest is quite tight and compact. So we need to release here, and my back is quite stretched out, so we need to start engaging there. So that's one way you can look at the asymmetrical weight shift in the squat. So where are they stretching out on their clothes, where is their weight shifting to, and then where is it shifting from, and then you can best design functional mobility to get them to shift their weight a lot better and more functional. Because you just imagine squatting like that with a barbell, how much pressure is going to be going through their hips and also through their ankles. It's going to be quite uncomfortable. So there's lots of ways you could go about programming for a person like this. Next, I've got the forward lean. So this is where they're shifting a lot of their weight over, and they're going to feel a lot of pressure on their lower back. So with the tight and weak areas, you got right through your calves, so you got your gastroc and soleus. So they're probably going to raise their heels up as well with this one. If not, they're still going to shift forward. Their hip flexor complex is going to be quite tight. Their abdominal complex is going to be quite tight too. So quite a lot of pulling through this area here. What's going to be weak is the anterior tibs, so on the side of the old calves, and your glute max is going to be quite inactive as well as the spine too, and intrinsic core stabilizers. So all of that is going to be playing a part in the way they move. So with these areas being tight and these areas being weak, that's what's going to be shifting that weight. So ways to get them working better: A, you could probably elevate their heels onto a plate, and B, probably get them to drop their arms a little bit lower and just set them a target. But then again, you can go, well, you're not going to have a quick fix with this, but you can have functional stretches that will help you address this, and also programming for strength in these areas. But I'll get into that later on in the video. Okay, down here we've got the old lower back arch. This is a popular one I see often. You get the anterior pelvic tilt happening. So again, pressure on the lower back there when you go to lift the bar. So we've got the tight hip flexor complex, erector spinae. So that's quite tight too. The lats will be quite tight, so it's bowing you back through the back. What's weak is your intrinsic core stabilizers. So right here is quite weak and stretched out. Hamstrings will be quite weak too, and glute max will need to be activated, because that'll be quite weak in that function right there. Again, heels will probably raise up with this, and also you might find the old knees rolling in. So you could do little drills of like floor bridges, and even like pressing against like their knees with their permission, of course, to try to activate their glutes, and doing some floor work to activate their core to try to neutralize that spine. So there's lots of ways you could program for this. Over here we got the lower back rounds. So this one I've seen a lot in older populations. As they become more inactive and tend to get more of a curve through their spine from inactivity, they're more likely to keep that rounded back when they try to squat. And as you see here, they're not getting that flexion through their hips. And as you know, with a squat, you need that flexion to be happening. Otherwise, that weight is going to be finding the path of least resistance somewhere else, and we really want to get that hip active. So right here we've got tight hamstrings, tight adductor magnus, so right through the hamstrings, rectus abdominis quite tight, external obliques are quite tight, and then we got weak glute max, the psoas major, hip flexor complex, erector spinae, and lats are quite weak, and intrinsic core stabilizers. So there's quite a lot going on to make that happen. So the first thing I'll do is like try to teach this person just to hip hinge standing first. Like there's lots of things you can do to practice that, and if they're still having trouble, then you can work on stretching out all the tight areas and doing foam rolling, and then activating the weaker areas that need some activation. Like I said, someone who's got this is probably like lacking a lot of activation right through here. So doing a lot of posterior chain work would be quite helpful for this person, as well as teaching that hip hinge motion. Again, elevating the heels onto a plate will probably be quite useful for this person, but they're probably still going to be protecting themselves, and they probably won't get enough hip flexion as well, but it is an option you could try. So programming based on these compensations, as you see from all of this area, I've like categorized everything here from tight to weak. And when you're programming for someone, whether it's a client or an orientation, you want to keep these in mind, because you want to be getting your client to be like functionally as optimal as they can. So they don't need to be a super athlete to lose weight, or if their goal is to just lose weight for a wedding, or if the goal is, let's say, getting fit for like going a marathon. You don't need to be super athletic, but everyone should work on being as optimally functional as they can, because if you start to train with compensations, you will encourage some bad habits happening, and you're more likely to injure yourself in the long term. And if you're addressing this stuff, you're probably going to have a client for a very long time, because you're getting the workouts more comfortable for them. So having those tight and weak areas mapped out with your clients just from these assessments, you are going to be able to program optimally for these clients. And this is just one assessment. There's so many assessments you could do. This is just squat in particular. You could just base one client off just the whole squat. And like I was saying earlier, it also affects the lower body and the upper body, because you got the weight shift through the arms. As you get weaker through the core and tighter through the back, your arms are more likely to fall forward, and that again is going to cause some weight shift. So marking down those tight and weak areas when you're doing the assessment is quite handy for programming and referring back to your client, because when you get them to squat and they're squatting like this, after a month of training and you're addressing the tight areas and you're engaging the weaker areas, they're gonna squat a lot better, and you can just compare that and get them to like validate that change and how stoked they'll be feeling. So the trick to all of this too is knowing what to do with all this information while you got it. So the squat's quite useful for full body programming, but you want to keep in mind, I want to know how to address the tight areas and how to address the weak areas. So it's proven to work. The old inhibit, lengthen, activate, and integrate. Use it all the time if my clients have like imbalances. So when you're working with inhibit, that's referring to self-myofascial release, so foam rolling, or it could be like PNF type of stretching to address those tighter areas. because what happens is they're forming adhesions in the muscles and a lot of restrictions, and that's probably what's going to be happening to these people when they're squatting like so. Then once you release those adhesions through foam rolling those tight areas, you want to lengthen those areas at the same time. So now you've got rid of the adhesions, you should have a little bit more ability to stretch out those muscles again. But it doesn't end there, because when you like inhibit the area and then lengthen it, you got to think that's one part of the puzzle. The other part is actually activating and integrating these muscles. So you got the weaker areas you want to start engaging as well. Otherwise we're just going to be giving our muscles a sugar hit, like I was saying about my chest earlier, rolling in. I'm going to be like foam rolling through here and then stretching through here for a typical chest stretch, but I'm not doing anything with my rotator cuff or my upper back that is lengthening out to cause internal rotation. So we've got the other piece to the puzzle we need to address, and that can tie into programming as well. So we need to activate these weaker areas like the glute max, the hip flexors, the erector spinae. We need to activate, and then we need to integrate these movements all together. So the areas that we've had tight, that were loosened up, the areas that were activated, we need to all integrate into a functional movement to get us moving our kinetic chain functionally together while engaging all those muscles. So as you can see, there's heaps of ways you can program just from a squat assessment, and that's just going through the whole kinetic chain. How are their ankles looking? How are their knees looking? How's their hips looking, and their shoulders and their head and their neck? All of that, you just address those tight areas, those weak areas, and note it down, and then you're going to be able to program for a client and get them functionally and optimally more better at what they're doing while achieving their goals, no matter what their goal is. Like, this stuff isn't reserved for just athletes, it's good for all populations. So hopefully that was helpful. Like I was saying before, what helped me when I first started as a trainer is looking for the creases in my shirt or creases in my shorts or pants if I couldn't quite see what was going on. So like I was saying, internal rotation, I've got creases in the front of my shirt, and my shirt at the back is lengthening out. So obviously tight here, weaker at the back. But that can only work to so much. But it is a helpful tool to look at if you're going just by visually and you're starting out. Anyway, hopefully that was helpful. But yeah, keep programming for your clients. Cool.